Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha television. You're watching this special telecast with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will lay the foundation stone of the new Parliament building in New Delhi's Sansad Marg on December 10th. The new building is an intrinsic part of the vision of Aatmanirbhar Bharat. It will be a landmark opportunity to build a people's parliament for the first time after independence, one which will match the needs and the aspirations of new India in the 75th anniversary of independence in 2022. The building will be modern, state-of-the-art and energy efficient with highly non-obtrusive security facilities to be built as a triangular-shaped building adjacent to the present parliament. Lok Sabha will be 3 times of the existing size and Rajya Sabha will be substantially bigger. The interiors of the new building will showcase a rich blend of Indian culture and diversity of our regional arts, crafts, textiles and architecture. The design plan includes space for a magnificent central constitutional gallery which will be accessible to the public. In this special telecast, we will analyze the significance and importance of Parliament and the new building. Joining me on the program today are Chakshu Roy, Head of Outreach PRS Legislative Research, V.K. Agnihotri, former Secretary General Rajya Sabha, and Ashok Tandon, Senior Journalist. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this special telecast. Mr. Tandon, let me first begin the program with you. Before we talk about the new building and the magnificence of it and how we are all looking forward to it, let's talk about the existing Parliament building and how significant and important it is.
Well, it is indeed a very historic building, but the fact remains that when the British were starting building this complex, the entire Britain's Delhi, they didn't have any intention of leaving India. Let's be very clear about it. And therefore, all the arrangements which they made in the present Parliament House were from their own point of view. And so they started this. And if I may be allowed to go back into the history, see
Please
why the capital was shifted to Delhi is a very significant thing. Because after 1857, the first war of independence, when the entire thing was handed over to the British Empire rather than the East India Company, it was a strategic decision to move the capital to Delhi because it had become almost impossible to rule right up to northwest of Punjab. So they decided to move capital to Delhi, and for a very long-term perspective, they started building all these complexes. And in 2020, when the foundation stone of this particular Parliament House was laid, and it was from their own perspective. So I don't think they had the independent India in mind. But nevertheless, India achieved independence, and all that the Constituent Assembly meetings took place in this very building, and India's independence was also declared. But over the years, we have seen this Parliament House building, although we have constructed a couple of annexes and all these areas, new library, Balyogi auditorium, but it is still not sufficient from the point of view of future. So in the 75th anniversary of India's independence, if India can get a new parliament complex, which will be a symbol of India's independence, 75 years of independence, and with all the infrastructure, as you very rightly stated. And therefore, the old building is not being demolished. There is a perception, wrong impression. It is going to be, for archives. It will be archaeological model, and it will remain part of the whole thing. So I think it's a welcome step that on this occasion, a new state-of-the-art building is now being going to begin tomorrow. Foundation stone is being laid by the Prime, and it will be for the posterity, maybe another 100 years. You never know. So therefore, I think the old building will be used as we know. So many portraits are there in the Central Hall. There are so many statues of the veteran parliamentarians in the corridors of the present, but it can't house all the members of parliament. Members have no room. Even some of the ministers are functioning from makeshift cabins. And the secretariat also, they need, although it was, a couple of stories were added in 1956, but even then it is not sufficient. Now in the new arrangement, all the members, as you said, the number is going to increase over the years in the next census because the Lok Sabha members' number was frozen. One of the reasons being that the chamber cannot house the members. So when the members' number is increased after the next census, obviously you will need a better accommodation. But in this arrangement, all the MPs will have their exclusive rooms also. The Shram Shakti Bhavan, which stands today, will be demolished and there will be some kind of an underground arrangement linking all the members of parliament room to the new parliament building. And I think it will be a majestic move. Also, the redevelopment of the central vista will add, I think, color to the whole thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Mr. Agnihotri, you spent many memorable years in the existing Parliament building. So as far as your memories are concerned of the building itself, and why there is a need for a new complex going forward.
Well, I recollect the three incidents. You see, as you are aware, I was also Secretary Parliamentary Affairs between 2003 to 2005. And that was my real first introduction to the Parliament building. And a part of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs offices were on the second floor. And therefore, as a part of my introduction to the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, I took a tour of all the offices which were part of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, and I went to the second floor. And I was horrified. Of course, I have been to other buildings like even your Shastri Bhavan and once or even North Block. Yeah. As you go up to the floors, you find wires hanging and crowding, and I mean all kind of things are there which are not visible to the visitors who are confined only to the main offices or the ministers' offices and all that on that floor. So when I went there, I was horrified. It was worse than any other place in North Block or in Shastri Bhavan or anywhere else where I had worked earlier, even Nirman Bhavan. And therefore, I was not very happy with the kind of space that was available and the kind of infrastructure that was there. Then when I later came as Secretary General Rajya Sabha, I recollect two incidents. In 2009, Mr. Murli Devra, then the petroleum minister, the ceiling of his office partly broke and it collapsed. Luckily, nobody was there in the room at that time, and therefore harm was caused. But that was an indication that the building was giving that, sorry, I'm unable to go on and on anymore. And then there was, about a couple of years later, 3 years later, there was a fire accident in the kitchen. Now, what has happened is actually that there is a lot of retrofitting. You see, these buildings were built before the era of computers, before the era of air conditioning, before the era of audio-visual revolution that we are seeing. And a lot of retrofitting has been done, which has really not worked to the stability of the building. And a lot of problems we have seen, even sewerage. And as Secretary Parliamentary Affairs also, I was busy looking at all kind of infrastructure that is collapsing. So that is a very sad state of affairs, which probably not many people know, that inside it is crumbling. Very often this air conditioning that is provided used to leak, and then then the House had to sort of adjourn for a few minutes before the thing could be fitted up. So given all this background, I think it is not it is inevitable that a new complex is constructed in order to accommodate all the members of parliament and other infrastructure to be provided to the members of parliament so that they can work in an environment which is discussion friendly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Discussion friendly environment, that's what we need at the end of the day as far as the parliament is concerned. So, Chakshu Roy, let me bring you to the picture now. moving from the old building to the new building, let's not forget there are, there are several reports, several times that many people have come out and spoken as well about expanding the size itself of Parliament and how the members could increase too. So all this needs to be taken into consideration, and space is going to be a big constraint if we continue in this particular building, and hence we need a new building.
Frank, the question of housing the legislative chambers goes back, even before the construction of the Parliament building. In 1913, when the new capital of Delhi was being thought about, at that point of time, India had a unicameral legislature. There was a legislative council, and it was a small legislative council. And in 1917, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms happened. And one aspect of those reforms was that those reforms led to the 1919 Government of India Act. And the 1919 Government of India Act established bicameral legislatures in the country. Now, because there was an additional house of 140 people that was created, there was a need to house this new assembly of 140 people. So two things happened. One, the Legislative Council was shifted to Metcalfe House in the northern part of Delhi. And the Legislative Assembly, which was meeting in the Legislative Chamber in the old Secretariat building, that Legislative Chamber was expanded to accommodate 140 people. And that's where the first time Legislative Assembly met. Then, in 1921, the foundation stone for the Parliament building was laid out. 6 years later, the Parliament building was inaugurated. But right after inauguration, there was improvements on the Parliament building. So, for example, the second floor of Parliament building was constructed in 1929. Then, when India started becoming independent and the whole constitution-making process started, then there was another need to accommodate a large number of constituent assembly members. I recall from documents, the number of members in the constituent assembly was in excess of 300, I think 389. And there was no space in the three chambers of the existing Parliament building to accommodate them. So the Parliament library or the Parliament reading hall, which was the central hall, that had to be refurbished, and there were benches that were added, and that's where the constitution was made, and that's where India was declared independent. Now we think of Parliament House as one building, but it's an entire complex. When we became independent, three things started happening. One, there was no more Chamber of Princesses. So the Chamber of Princesses was converted into a Supreme Court. So the Federal Court of India was there in 1948. The Federal Public Service Commission, so Parliament House, years before it went to its own building on 1952. When India became independent, then the work of the legislature expanded quite a bit. The number of parliamentary staff expanded quite a bit. I had mentioned earlier that the Parliament Reading Hall and the Parliament Library was converted into Constitution Hall and the Central Hall. So two things happened. One, there was need for a separate secretariat building where parliamentary staff, committee staff could sit and committee meetings could take place. There was auditorium space that was created there. And then a separate library building was created. When more space was needed, there was another Parliament Secretariat building that was created. So over the years, there has been a fair bit of work that has happened both inside the Parliament building and also in the Parliament House complex. Now, one of the most visible parts of the Parliament building is the Parliament building itself. But then there are these key aspects of the Parliament House complex, like the Central Reception Hall, the Secretariat buildings, where a lot of background work for Parliament happens. But there are two things which are also a little bit missing in our Parliament House complex. Now, one of those things is space within the legislative chamber. Now, whenever we watch Rajya Sabha TV or Lok Sabha TV, one visual that we see is that members of parliament are sitting really close to each other. So there's not enough space for them to sit and organize their papers in one. So that's one. The second aspect is that members of parliament don't have offices within the Parliament House complex. So either they have to meet their visitors in a parliamentary canteen, or they have to go out and meet them at their residences. So the features which are existing in all the parliaments around the world.
Let's hear the chairman of the Rajya Sabha as well and hear his views and thoughts on the floor of the House when he spoke about the new parliament building. Let's take a listen in.
माननीय सदस्यगण, भारतीय गणराज्य का सबसे बड़ा मंदिर है यह संसद भवन अपने 92 स्वर्णिमा वर्ष पूरा कर चुका है। विश्व के सबसे बड़ा लोकतंत्र के इस मंदिर के भवन से सभी राजनीतिक निर्णय लिया जाते हैं। स्वतंत्रता के बाद से अब तक लोकतंत्र के बढ़ते स्वरूप ने देश की इस सबसे पवित्र और महान धरोहर का उत्तरदायित्व भी बढ़ाया है और इससे देश की अपेक्षाओं का विस्तार भी किया है। ऐसे में यह हम सबकी आकांक्षा है कि विश्व के सबसे बड़े गणतंत्र और सबसे विशाल लोकतंत्र का संसद भवन सबसे भव्य और सबसे आकर्षक बने। और इसके लिए मैं देश के प्रधानमंत्री जी से, सरकार से, हम सबके ओर से आग्रह करना चाहता हूं कि भारत की आज़ादी के 75 वर्ष की 2022 तक पूरा होने पर नव भारत के उनके संकल्पों में संसद भवन का विस्तार और आधुनिकीकरण को भी सम्मिलित किया जाए। मैं सदन के सभी सदस्यों के तरफ से देश और सरकार को यह विश्वास दिलाता चाहता हूं कि संसद की पवित्रता और गरिमा का अक्षुण्ण रखा जाएगा। The sum and substance of this is because I don't know whether there was arrangement. The parliament has become pretty old building, and you are seeing now and then some thing or other happening. So there has been a request by members since long. I was a minister of earlier as urban development minister also, parliamentary minister also. We met number of times to modernize the building with all the facilities which are comfortable for the members. So we will be appealing to the government to consider. After that, before taking a final decision, they will consult us also, Rajya Sabha as well as Lok Sabha, to make it a more comfortable, more functional and more useful for the members with all the modern facilities. That is the observation I have made for information.
So, Mr. Agnihotri, we heard the chairman of the Rajya Sabha there speak about, Parliament and 75 years and how 2022 is going to be so important for us. And, it's incredible to have this dream of ensuring that we get this grand structure out there, get rid of the colonial baggage and have something that is, that speaks about Aatmanirbhar Bharat and, that resonates with the people of this country as well, isn't it?
Yes, that is true. Actually, it is a new building will not be a totally modern type of building structure with a facade which will not merge with the old. It will merge. I mean, that is the idea, that the facade of the new building should be in consonance with the facade of the old building. So that is how it will look, but it will be a much grander stuff, as the Vice President mentioned. And it will provide, as the earlier speaker said, some space for the members of parliament also. And actually, it is not yet been said, but I'm sure that when the MPs have a place to sit for themselves, then they will be able to use their personal staff and others for preparing themselves in a better manner to participate in the debates. So just providing space is not going to be a physical thing, but it will also impact on the mental contribution of the members of parliament in the discussions and debates of the two houses of parliament, because they will have a place to sit and they will have more time to get literature and study it and get the help of experts to advise them and then put their thoughts together and contribute to the discussions and debates.
Absolutely. Chakshu, as far as the existing building is concerned, let's go a little bit into the history of the building itself and some of the major milestones, really.
Frank, the first major milestone was the foundation laying ceremony for the building. In 1921, the Duke of Connaught visited India. And the purpose of his visit was to do two or three things. The first thing that he did was he inaugurated the first session of the Legislative Assembly that was for which elections had taken place in 1920. So that was one thing he did. The second thing that he did was that he laid the foundation stone for the War Memorial, which is the India Gate. The third thing that the Duke of Connaught did was laid the foundation stone for the Parliament building. The work on the Parliament building then started off, and it took 7 years to get the Parliament building in. But even before the work started off, there was a lot of discussion between the architects of Delhi, which is Mr. Baker and Mr. Lutyens, about what should be the design of Parliament. Mr. Lutyens was in favor of a circular, a Colosseum kind of a design. And Mr. Baker, because of the site where Parliament was supposed to be situated, he was more in favor of a triangular design. Now, it is interesting that the triangular design is now going to come back because the new Parliament is going to be envisaged in a much more of a triangular space. Now, when we look at the institution of Parliament, here's an interesting trivia. For example, in Washington, D.C., no building is allowed to be greater in height than the Capitol building where the US Congress meets. Similarly, in our Parliament House complex, if you see the buildings, for example, the closest building to the Parliament House is the Parliament Library building. And the top of the Parliament Library building does not exceed in length or height of the Parliament building itself. Mr. Agnihotri is right about how the facade of the new Parliament building and the old Parliament building would hopefully be complementary to each other. Then there have been other milestones. These other milestones have been not only about the development of the Parliament House complex, but also about milestones within Parliament itself. So, for example, one milestone was the name of Rajya Sabha. It was called Council of State. It was formally changed to Rajya Sabha. There was a definition of what constitutes the Parliament House complex. So it is not only the Parliament building, but all the surrounding areas within the complex. So the definition of what Parliament House complex is. Over the years, another development that took place was when parliamentary committee meetings started happening on a large scale. There was space needed not only for the meetings, but there was also space needed for the chairmen of those committees. So the latest addition to the Parliament complex is a Secretariat building where all the Parliament, the department-related parliamentary chairmen have their offices. Now, in addition to all of these smaller things, there are other technological milestones. So, for example, a teleprinter was installed in Parliament in the 1950s. In the 1980s, the computer network started getting installed in Parliament. In the early 90s, Doordarshan put up a satellite dish for telecast of proceedings. That then followed in the early and the late 2000s with full-fledged Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha TV channels, which then had place to start their studios and their broadcast proceedings. So over the last 90 years, there has been a journey of architecture, there has been a journey of statues, for example. In the 90s onwards, Parliament House complex started to get a lot of statues in the alcoves of the Parliament building and the precincts of the Parliament House complex. So that's another milestone, that how do you recognize a contribution by eminent individuals, both in the space of Parliament and in independence of India. Similarly, there are ceremonies that are held regularly to commemorate the birth and death anniversaries of national leaders in the Central Hall. And whenever you see the president speak in the Central Hall, you get a view of all the portraits that are put of former freedom fighters and former prime ministers that line up the Central Hall of Parliament.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll step into a short break on the program right now, but we'll continue our discussion on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Defeat coronavirus. Let us always remember, wear a mask. Wash hands. Follow physical distancing. Together, we'll succeed. Together, we'll win against COVID-19. Standing at the center of Quwwatul Islam Mosque inside the historic Qutub complex, this iconic iron pillar gives us a glimpse of Delhi's tryst with the kingdom and its supremacy. This iconic pillar bears an inscription written in a later form of Brahmi script of Ashokan time. The inscription on the pillar talks about the victory of a great king, defeating his enemies from the expanse of areas between what is now Bengal to Punjab. The pillar is 7 meters tall and is 1 meter below the ground with diameter of 48 centimeters at the foot, getting slender at the top, measuring 29 centimeters. Weighing approximately 6.5 tons, the pillar was manufactured by forged welding and has not rusted ever since. As per the popular folklores, Delhi's Rajput king Anangpal Tomar gave this land a name based on this pillar. The story goes that King Anangpal Tomar was told by a sage that this pillar is immovable and rested on a hood of a serpent king, Vasuki. Out of sheer curiosity, Tomar decided to check the ground beneath the pillar and surprisingly, he indeed found the pillar resting on the head of a serpent king. In an awe of what he has seen, Tomar bowed to the land and ordered to install the pillar back. The pillar could be fixed back firmly and remained loose, dhila as we call it in Hindi. It was here Delhi got the first variant of his name, Delhi, the land whose soil is loose.
साथियों, ऐसे समय में अफवाहें भी तेजी से फैलती हैं। कोई कहता है ये नहीं खाना है, वो नहीं करना है। कुछ लोग 4 नई चीजें लेकर के आ जाएंगे कि ये खाने से कोरोना वायरस से बचा जा सकता है, ढीकना करने से बचा जा सकता है। मेरी सभी देशवासियों को प्रार्थना है, मेहरबानी करके इन अफवाहों से भी बचना है। आपको कुछ भी लगता है, जो भी करें, अपने डॉक्टर की सलाह से ही करें। हम स्वयं डॉक्टर न बन जाएं।
Welcome back. You're watching this special telecast on the Parliament complex on Rajya Sabha television. I'm Frank Rausen Pereira. I have with me two eminent panelists to talk about the Parliament complex, to talk about the Parliament itself, its significance and its importance. Chakshu Roy, Head of Outreach PRS Legislative Research, is with me on the program, as well as VK Agnihotri, former Secretary General, Rajya Sabha. So, Mr. Agnihotri, continuing the discussion and taking the discussion forward and building on some points that have already been made, let's not forget that, the Parliament complex itself is a massive complex, and there are so many things that happen within the complex. Many people, or most people, wouldn't know, what happens really within the complex itself. They think that it's just the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha and the proceedings take place and there's nothing else to it. But there's so much more that happens within the complex, isn't it?
Yes. See, apart from the two chambers of the two houses of Parliament, as well as the central hall, which is common to both the members, there are a lot of committee rooms. And before the new building was constructed, as Chakshu was mentioning, to provide for these department-related standing committees, most of the committee meetings were being held on the first floor of the Parliament building itself. So committee meetings are held. And naturally, there are large number of committees. See, it is not only the department-related standing committees. There are committees of the House, that is, of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. There is a Rules Committee. There is a Privileges Committee. And like that, there are so many committees of the two houses which function independently. So their chairmen are provided accommodation there. Then you have the political parties. So leaders of political parties are accommodated and some rooms are allotted to these parties. Then you have the ministers. The ministers are also accommodated in some rooms of the Parliament House. And then you have the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. The Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs is also accommodated there. So like that, there are, and apart from that, of course, there is a canteen and there is a dining area. And like that, there are so many other facilities available in the Parliament House.
Absolutely. And Chakshu, since we are here, let's talk about what really constitutes the Parliament complex as a whole. What are some of the significant, offices, significant spaces that are present within the entire complex itself?
My earliest memory of the Parliament House complex is when on a school trip, I was taken to the Parliament Gallery to witness the proceedings of the lower house. So for me, the Parliament House complex is not only about members of Parliament, it is also about common citizens like all of us who get to witness the functioning of a Parliament at much close quarters. So when you enter the Parliament House, you take the stairs to the first floor, and then there are public galleries from where you can sit and watch the proceedings of either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. And when you're sitting in those public galleries, you get a view of the speaker, and you can see below members participating in a debate. You have headphones that you can put on and listen to what is exactly being said in the House, and there's some translation that is provided. So that is one aspect of the public-facing part of Parliament House. Then there is the Parliament Library and the Parliament Museum. Now, the Parliament Library and Museum is a recent addition to a Parliament complex. The Parliament Library building was inaugurated in the early 2000s, and then during Speaker Somnath Chatterjee's term, a Parliament Museum was set up. Now, a Parliament Museum is also a fascinating place because it provides this rich history of how the evolution of our freedom struggle, how the evolution of our parliament's taken place. There's a lot of memorabilia that is there, that is kept. Every time a visiting parliamentary delegation comes and they offer a gift to the chairman of Rajya Sabha or to the speaker of Lok Sabha, that gift is displayed there. And the museum also is a children's corner where a lot of activities are held. The Parliament Library is also open to scholars to come and research on issues. There's a reading room there that members of Parliament often access. The Bureau of Parliamentary Studies has a number of seminar halls in the Parliament Library building where training programs for members of Parliament or other seminars that are held not only for parliamentary staff, but for staff of state legislative assemblies and also staff from neighboring parliaments. Now, when we look at the Parliament House complex, all of this denotes the Secretariat buildings, the Parliament Library, the main building of Parliament itself, the reception hall, all of them denote the Parliament House complex. Now, within the Parliament House complex, different people have different privileges. So, for example, you and I, when we visit Parliament House, we visit in our capacity as individuals. And within the legislative chamber, other members, somebody else is termed a stranger. So Rajya Sabha members of Parliament cannot walk into the Lok Sabha chamber. Lok Sabha members of Parliament cannot walk into the Rajya Sabha chamber. And ordinary citizens, we can watch from the galleries, but we are not admitted to the chambers of the two houses. But there are some exceptions to this. So, for example, the Attorney General is allowed to sit and to sit in the legislative chamber and hear the proceedings of the House. Ministers who might be members of Lok Sabha can go to Rajya Sabha and participate in the debates there because in their capacity as ministers, and vice versa. So there is a lot of history, there is a lot of protocol, there is a lot of precedent that is involved. And one of the Central House of Parliament is also a place where visiting heads of state address a gathering of the two houses of Parliament. The last time when President of the United States, Barack Obama, was in India, he addressed members of the Parliament of the two houses there. During Speaker Somnath Chatterjee's time, a number of lecture series were also organized in the Central House of Parliament. But there is one special aspect of the Parliament House complex, which is the original copies of the two original copies of the Constitution are also in the Parliament House complex. They are in the Parliament building. They are kept in a specially made helium case so as to preserve the pages of the original Constitution. There's a lot of different things that happen within the Parliamentary House, within the Parliament complex.
Right. Okay. Let's now listen in to what the Speaker of the Lok Sabha had to say really as far as Parliament is concerned. Let's take a listen in now.
नए संसद का भवन जिसका शिलान्यास 10 तारीख को 1 बजे माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के द्वारा भूमि पूजन के साथ शुरू होगा। आत्मनिर्भर भारत स्वदेशी सब देश की अलग अलग देश की विविधताओं की अलग अलग महत्वपूर्ण वस्तुएं और कई अलग अलग प्रदेश की अपनी अपनी वहाँ की कलाकृतियाँ, वहाँ की विशेष रूप से वहाँ की अपनी द्वारा अपने शिल्पकारों के द्वारा बनाई हुई कई हस्तशिल्प की वस्तुएं भी यहाँ पर लगेगी। इससे बेहतर और नई तकनीकी और सुरक्षा की दृष्टि से उपयुक्त भवन होगा जो हमारे गौरव का प्रतीक होगा। ये हमारा भवन ईंट पत्थर का भवन नहीं, ये 130 करोड़ जनता की आशाओं आकांक्षाओं का प्रतीक है, जहाँ पर बैठकर हम सभी माननीय सांसद अपनी अपनी भावनाओं का अभिव्यक्ति करते हैं और वहाँ पर जनता की बात को कहते हैं और लोकतंत्र को मजबूत करते हैं।
Well, that was the Speaker of the Lok Sabha there, Om Birla, speaking about the new Parliament complex and how it's going to reflect the aspirations of 130 crore Indians. Taking the discussion forward now, Mr. Agnihotri, as far as the new complex is concerned, what is it that you're looking forward to? How is it going to be different from the old complex?
Well, number one, it will be more spacious. As Chakshu mentioned, right now, when from the visitors gallery you look at the house, the chamber below, you find that MPs are sitting very close together, and with the diseases like corona around, that is not really advisable, and that is why during the brief monsoon session, when the corona was at its peak, the MPs of both the houses were distributed across the whole Parliament House. And therefore, the sessions of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha were held in the morning and evening. So morning Rajya Sabha used to meet, afternoon the Lok Sabha used to meet, because the members of the Rajya Sabha were sitting in the Lok Sabha. Chakshu Roy said that members of Lok Sabha cannot walk into the Rajya Sabha, cannot walk into the Lok Sabha, but or from the Lok Sabha cannot walk into Rajya Sabha. But thanks to Corona, they were able to sit there. And not only that place, but even the galleries, visitors' galleries were occupied by MPs. So there was a huge space constraint which will now be taken care of. Number one. Number two, as I mentioned earlier, this the current building was built before the era of computers, before the era of video and audio revolution. So the new chamber will have facilities for the members of parliament to check their parliament-related papers online. There will be a tablet in front of them, and the audio-video facilities will also be there for them to see the proceedings. So it will be a more state-of-the-art kind of a building, and it will be also, they say, a green building. So there will not be any, solar power, etc., will be used for providing energy there to supplement the energy, this thing. And it will be a better experience for everyone, including the members of parliament as well as the visitors to the visitors visiting gallery.
Absolutely. All right. So, Chakshu, we just heard from Mr. Agnihotri there the salient features of the new parliament complex. As far as you are concerned, what is it that you're going to look forward to? What is it going to consist of? What's going to be different?
Frank, from the media reports that have come out about the design of the new parliament building, there are, as a citizen, I'm looking forward to one or two things. One of them is that there is going to be a constitution hall, which will showcase artifacts and related to the constitution, possibly have also displays around our constitution and its history. So I think that's one thing that all of us should be looking forward to. I don't speak on behalf of members of parliament, but the media reports suggest that members of parliament would have, every member of parliament in the new building will get a desk. Frank, members of parliament would be looking forward to sitting spaces which are slightly wider. I think now there will be sitting spaces for two members to sit together. They will have more space. Currently, not all seats in parliament chambers have a desk attached to them. So the two houses, only the first two rows have desks there. The new plans that are being talked about seem to suggest that each of the seats in the parliament chambers in the two houses will have desks attached to them. Throughout the country, for example, in the Kerala Legislative Assembly, in some of the legislative assemblies in the Northeast, in the newly created Jharkhand Legislative Assembly, there are electronic mechanisms that have been put in place. So in the Kerala Legislative Assembly, seats have electronic screens so that members can access information. Finally, members of parliament will also get a slightly relaxed space to interact with each other. Currently, the central hall of Parliament is where all of them congregate to come and speak to each other and stuff. The new Parliament building envisages a separate lounge where members of Parliament will be able to sit, possibly work a little bit, exchange notes with their colleagues. So those are some of the features of the new Parliament building in addition to what Mr. Agnihotri was already saying.
And Mr. Agnihotri, let's go back now to the existing building or the old building, if you can call it that. And what has been your fondest memory? What has been those 2 or 3 things that have stood out for you as far as the present Parliament complex and building is concerned?
Description. Lot description from the Vedas and our ancient literature. They have been inscribed in different places. Then there are a lot of murals. And when you walk across the gallery, you see these murals. They are beautifully displayed there. And of course, I forgot to mention some of the statues of freedom fighters, etc., are also there in certain places. That is one set of memories. Other is the subsequently provided these lifts, which are very small and constrained. And one was always having this trouble traveling in those lifts, especially if you are accompanying the chairman, then chairman and his security personnel, etc. One could never travel with the chairman in the lift because he had to go separately and I had to go separately. So there was this huge space constraint in the lifts that have been built in the old building. So these are some of the memories of the old building, but I'm sure that this building will not be left unattended or go into dilapidation. I'm sure it will be put to some use, and there have been some suggestions. And one is that it can be made into a resource center to supplement the BPST's current, so that when the people come for training, you see, BPST organizes a training program for not only the officers of the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, but also for the officers of all the central government employees and even the employees of the state assemblies and even for employees or officers of parliaments of other countries. So these are the people who can be sort of shown around this area, and with some kind of audio visual presentation inside, it can be made into a living entity rather than being left into disuse. And there is also a suggestion that a media center can be set up in the old building, because right now there is no such facility available in this place. So there are a lot of things that can be done to keep it a living entity even when the new parliament building is around.
Absolutely. And Chakshu, as far as the old building is concerned, the present parliament complex is concerned, what stands out for you? What are some of the memorable speeches that you can possibly recall, that you can think of, and that you would like to speak about?
Frank, I've been following Parliament for the last 15, 16 years, and there have been a number of memorable speeches. But like Mr. Agnihotri said, some of my fondest memories in the Parliament House complex is just walking around the Parliament building. There is always something to see. So, for example, if you walk in the corridors of the ground floor, there are these wonderful murals that were commissioned which depict different times in our history. And these are colorful murals which were painted by artists in the 1950s. Our first speaker, Mr. Mavlankar, had commissioned these murals. If you take the steps and walk up to the first floor of the Parliament, there is this giant circular corridor that you can walk around. When committee meetings happens there, the Public Accounts Committee meeting or the Estimates Committee meeting, you can see members of Parliament going into those meetings and participating in those debates. Then on the first floor, there are these canteens. where if you're lucky and your member of parliament invites you, you can actually have a tea or a coffee with your member of parliament there. But to me, one of the most wonderful things that has happened to Parliament is how Parliament has come closer to people. There used to be a lot of effort that had to be placed to try and go to the galleries. A lot of that process is streamlined. The live telecast of proceedings has also brought the proceedings closer to each one of us. And then the Parliament House complex is also a place where special events have happened. So the 50th anniversary of the Constitution was celebrated in the Central Hall, where everybody, all the presiding officers got together, a resolution was passed out. Parliament House complex is the place where India was declared independent at the stroke of midnight. So just in terms of historical significance, I think the Parliament House complex is part of our history.
Right.
And one last thing that I want to say. Every single member of parliament who's come to Parliament House complex has contributed to the institution of legislature in some way. Every speaker has left their mark, every chairman has left their mark with tweaking the rules of procedure, with ensuring that the institution lives up to its constitutional responsibilities.
Absolutely. And Mr. Agnihotri, let me get a closing comment in from you and Chakshu as well on looking ahead, looking forward. What is it that you're looking forward to?
Well, we are looking forward to more animated discussions and debates in a quieter environment, and more productivity of the type that the citizens of India expect from the parliament in the new age. So that would be my expectation from the new parliament building.
And Chakshu, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Frank, I second Mr. Agnihotri's remarks, as I always do. But I'm also looking forward to the fact as to how a new Parliament House complex would add to the productivity, add to the efficiency of our members of Parliament. Will it be better facilities? Will it be more space for them to work and for their teams to work? And how will they use these facilities to contribute effectively, contribute constructively to debate, discussions, whether it is on budget or on legislation in Parliament?
All right, we'll have to leave it at that, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and sharing your views and sharing your thoughts really as far as the Parliament complex is concerned, present and the one in the future. We're looking forward to it as well. It will be inaugurated by the Prime Minister of India. That is on Thursday at 1 p.m. So that's something that we are all looking forward to. With that, I'll call it a wrap on this telecast. See you again next time.